Today, we're really pleased to be joined by Ross Greer, the Green MSP for the west of Scotland. Hello, Ross.
Hi guys, can I be the first to apologise on behalf of the Scottish Green Party to Geoff Aberdein fiance and more importantly to the future brother-in-law that our chaotic week in politics is depriving of a volleyball game.
Thank you, Ross. We're off to a good start.
That's it. That's all we needed on the tape, actually, Ross. So thanks very much. Have a good. No, I'm joking. Right, let's get stuck in. I mean, what a frantic couple of days this has been for you, Ross, and indeed your party, the people of Scotland, the SNP. I mean, you had confidence in Humza Yousaf to the point where the Greens have been part of his government for the last year, and the SNP government for years before that. At what point did he lose your confidence?
The point at which Humza lost our confidence was when he ended the Butte House Agreement. It's as simple as that. And it's not just because we have been removed from the government. You don't remove the Green Party from the government and then keep the progressive policy programme that we shared. Our confidence in his office and him holding that office was based on delivery of the Butte House Agreement, that programme that our parties had negotiated together, we'd agreed, that both party memberships had approved of, and it became abundantly clear that in removing the Greens from the government, Humza's intention was to end that progressive policy platform and to stop the delivery of the kind of policies that Greens and the people who vote for us really care about.
With a kind of, broad look back over the last just over 24 hours at the time of recording, could you see a way where the Greens could have remained in a government coalition with the SNP if Humza Yousaf had approached this differently?
If he'd approached it differently by not ending the Butte House Agreement, definitely. I mean, that the agreement is the basis of this. That's what our members gave us a mandate to do. So for us, removing us from the government, ending the agreement, it's hard to read it any other way than Humza has capitulated to the more conservative forces, both within his party and in wider politics, who he had opposed last year. Humza won the SNP leadership on a platform where he proudly declared that he was a socialist, that he wanted a wealth tax. He described the relationship with us as being worth its weight in gold. Hours before he ended the agreement, he was batting for it. Ministers were batting for it. SNP ministers, SNP MPs were batting for it. And we had this sudden change. So it wasn't like he was gradually softening his language, looking for an off-ramp here. Something very suddenly changed, which frankly gives all of us the impression that he's not in control of events. He has been given an ultimatum. He has been threatened by people from within his own party. Whatever it is, it's SNP internal party politics. That's not for us. But nobody actually believes Humza Yousaf thought this was a good idea, unless he had some overnight Damsian conversion based on information nobody else is privy to. Like he needs to come out and explain why in 48 hours his judgment changed from one end of the spectrum to the other on this. The example that he gave was in recent days, the lack of stability that there's been in reference to the vote on Tuesday in Parliament, where MSPs from the governing majority did rebel. But they weren't Green MSPs. It was SNP MSPs who rebelled on an SNP bill that has no Green fingerprints on it whatsoever. So if Humza can't get SNP MSPs to vote for what SNP ministers are doing, his problems are much, much deeper than the relationship with my party.
Can I just come in there, Ross, if I may? I think that last point you make is absolutely spot on. I think you're right. He has got some difficulties within the party, but I suppose my question to you, therefore, is: do you not sympathise to some degree with him in that respect? Because you've got some problems with your own party. You've got the EGM, or you had the EGM coming up. It was looking unstable. To put it politely as well, in terms of whether there'd be the future of the Butte House Agreement. Does Humza not have the right to in this context to seek advice or guidance from his own party and recognise that you're both facing difficulties? And I suppose a follow up just to that. I want to know, why was it so acrimonious, the response? And I'm not accusing that. I just want to know what do you know how the conversation went? Because what I'm trying to tease out of this is, can you envisage a situation where there might be some confidence in supply, or there can be a renegotiation with Humza as First Minister of some sort of way forward?
So Humza ended what is fundamentally a confidence agreement. So he shouldn't be surprised that the response to that was that we lost confidence in him. The Butte House Agreement was based on two things. The SNP wanted stability to govern, wanted a majority to govern, and you know how difficult it can be to govern from minority. The 2016 session was frankly really unproductive in a lot of ways because of that. They wanted stability to govern, and we wanted to deliver on the policies that people vote for us for. So that was the exchange, was we gave the government confidence. We were part of the governing majority, and in exchange, the governing majority delivered some of our policies. Policies that, let's be honest, a lot of SNP members and supporters also wanted. There is a large and vibrant left wing to the SNP. So that was the exchange, and it became immediately clear to us that Humza's intention is not to deliver that agenda. So if our confidence is based on the policy programme that we get, the green influence in government, and that influence ends, especially in the circumstances that it makes us think he's capitulated to those much more conservative forces, the kind of people that, that our party opposes, whose politics we oppose. There's a question, and it sounds awfully transactional, and I don't mean it that way, but there is that fundamental question of, what are we getting here? Why would we give confidence to the guy who has just, whether he intended it or not, has just tried to humiliate us? I think in a lot of ways we had the running of the day. For whatever reason, he thought that the day would go very differently to how it actually did. What has annoyed us, I'll be completely honest, is these repeated suggestions from him since then that he still wants to cooperate with us. Why would you end the cooperation agreement and then say, but we can still cooperate? It's not like he's made any offer of what that cooperation would actually look like. We knew what the cooperation looked like. It was the agreement we negotiated that both our party memberships approved. It was a governing majority based on a policy programme. It was all set out in black and white. He chose to end that. And in our view, his judgment has now been called into question. His judgment is poorer than what we would expect for a First Minister, especially because he seems to have thought the day would have somehow played out differently. I'm not quite sure how he thought it would play out. And I mean, you're right, Geoff, there's an element of sympathy insofar as he has an extremely divided party. I would say our party is not nearly as divided as that, but there's clearly different views within our party. And as First Minister, he absolutely has the right to do what he did. But as MSPs, we have the right to then cast our verdict on that. And, he has made a judgment call. We obviously think it was the wrong judgment call. He's ended the agreement that our confidence was based on. So, 2 + 2 = 4 here. We no longer have confidence in the guy who ended the confidence agreement with us and appears to be doing so to ditch the progressive policy programme that we were delivering.
So you are voting 100% against the First Minister next Wednesday, based on what you just said?
Yeah. Absolutely.
100%.
We do not have confidence in Humza Yousaf.
No abstaining, just absolutely against. Okay?
And as a follow-up to that,
I'm not
then,
a big
Ross,
fan of abstentions. Sometimes they're necessary. Sometimes abstentions are necessary, but it's generally better to be decisive. Sometimes if you're between a rock and a hard place, two poor positions, an abstention can be a legitimate thing to do. This is not one of those situations. Like, we need to be honest with our voters here and with our members. We honestly don't have confidence in him, and let's not pretend that we're the only ones. I mean, if you took a private poll of his party and parliamentary group at the moment, I think it would probably be even worse than what the Chamber's verdict might be next week.
So, before we go, because we should go back to look at a couple of the policy issues and the priorities and so on as well, but just while you're on that then, that's crystal clear when it comes to let's call it the Douglas Ross motion. Is that the same position though when it comes to the Anas Sarwar motion? So in other words, you don't have confidence in Humza Yousaf, clear. Is there a circumstance in which you would have confidence in the Scottish Government? Or at least would abstain in that vote?
The interesting question there is, what Scottish Government will it be by the time we vote on Anas Sarwar's motion? Who will be the First Minister? What will the government actually be by then? Because at this rate, there's an increasingly high likelihood it's not going to be a Scottish Government led by Humza Yousaf. So that's a totally different question from the one that we're being asked at the moment.
Let's take the hypothetical then, Ross. So who could be a replacement for Humza Yousaf that would garner the support of the Scottish Greens for the Scottish Government? Because that seems to be what you're implying. If he's not there and someone else is, you could back the Scottish Government. Who's that person?
So it's not for us to choose the SNP's leader.
Sure, not asking you to. Who would you like it to be?
I'm quite sure that they're having those conversations. I've got to be honest, there's a much, much longer list of people who would have every right to be First Minister and that, we are not going to be necessarily working closely with, but we would respect. I think it's obvious to folk who we would have a problem with. We have been very honest about the gulf in perspectives between ourselves and Kate Forbes, as much as I have a lot of personal respect for Kate. There are plenty of other folk in that party who they could put up to be First Minister. I don't want to get into the situation of saying, here's a list of the people that we would vote for and here's a list of the people we wouldn't, because as much as I don't feel like they've respected our party's processes very much recently, I do have some respect for theirs, and I don't want it to look like we are trying to exact a price here. That's absolutely not what we're doing. We're not part of the government. It's up to the government now to make a decision collectively, the rest of them, about whether they want to be led by Humza Yousaf, who we don't have confidence in, and who it looks like Parliament's not going to have confidence in. If we're in a different situation, we will make a decision on that at the time. I realise that sounds like that super evasive politician's answer.
No, that's fine, because it's very fluid and there's a lot of moving parts here and it's difficult to predict what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone next week. But can I just, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but is there a sort of, so let's just say, hypotheticals, let's just say the status quo persists and Humza Yousaf is First Minister going into the Anas Sarwar confidence vote, the government one. Is your vote different because it's a vote of confidence in the government and will inevitably then, not inevitably, almost inevitably then lead to an election and potentially a unionist government, of course, after that election? So is your vote in the Anas Sarwar confidence motion, while Humza Yousaf is still First Minister, different potentially from your vote in the Humza Yousaf confidence motion?
It is a different question. So we've not taken a decision as a group about how we would vote there, because as you say, very fluid. There's a range of hypotheticals. Humza could be the First Minister leading that government when we get to the Anas Sarwar motion. A whole bunch of other people could, frankly, by the time we get to that point. So we've not taken a decision on that precisely because you say it is a different question. We don't have confidence in Humza Yousaf as First Minister. That's a different question to confidence in the Scottish Government, especially because what Labour seem to be indicating here, you could take the somewhat cheeky point of view and say, well, Labour have never tabled this before, so obviously they had confidence in the Scottish Government when the Greens were in it. But Anas Sarwar has obviously lost confidence the moment that Patrick and Lorna were out the door. But really, what he's trying to do is cast a verdict on the last 2.5 years. We are proud of the last 2.5 years. So if what the Scottish Labour Party are trying to do is say that the Scottish Government has failed over the last 2.5 years, we would obviously disagree with that. We are proud of what the government has actually delivered. That's why we are unhappy with the ending of the agreement that was delivering all that.